Strap yourselves in because you're about to do some crazy stuff with Python expressions. So in this example, we're going to get a wheel to rotate along a path. It's going to follow the contours of the ground perfectly. And we are also going to get the rotations calculated on a cool, fancy Python driver. So we can actually move the geometry here and our wheel will follow. Plus, we can actually change the length of our curve and the path, and it will also update accordingly. So strap yourself in, the learning's about to get real. Here's a file that should be looking back at you when you're following along at home, and all we've got in it is one wheel with a tiny little red mark to help us see the wheel spinning around. So what we're first going to do is build all the assets, then we're going to attach the wheel to that path and do the fancy stuff to make it move. All right, so the first thing we're going to do, let's build some stuff. I'm going to jump into top view and build the ground. Shift A, I'm going to add in a plane for that. And I've got my redo panel open here. Rather than scaling and applying that, I'm just going to resize it to a size of 10. That'll be enough for us. And now I'm going to jump into edit mode to add some more geometry, some verts that we can push around to make a little bumpy road. So I'm in edit mode. Hit W or right click if you're on the default settings, like most of you probably are. I'm going to choose subdivide. Now I'm also going to bring up my redo panel here because the default isn't enough. I can drag it up to 10, but I can't go any further than that. But I can actually click in here and type. So I'm going to type 20 and that will be plenty enough for us. Okay, that is good. Jump back into object mode. And I'm also going to add a subdivision surface modifier on that. I can do that over here in the modifiers, or there's a shortcut by in the 3D view, just pushing Control 1, and that's going to add it already for me. And if we don't want these corners, we can actually turn that off with keep corners, but I actually do like it on for this, so that I know, oh, there's a subdivision surface on there because I can see it's rounding out. All right, that is my ground. I'm not going to name it yet. I'll add in my path first, which we can use. We can actually use any type of curve, but I'm going to use a Bezier curve. So let's go, whoops, Shift A, add in a curve, and then the Bezier. Okay. And now I'm going to jump into edit mode, and I want to show you a few cool things that you can do with this. You obviously know that you can grab, scale, and rotate these points around, but if you quickly want to add extra points, just have one selected and then Control left click, and you can add in some extra points anywhere that you need. Also, if you want to connect these points, see how they're disconnected at the moment, you can press Alt C, and that will make it a continuous loop for a track for our wheel to go around. That same setting is up here in curve under toggle cyclic. You can see the shortcut Alt C. So there we go. We can toggle it on or toggle it off. Alt C. Another thing that we can do, I don't like how bumpy this is at the moment, so I'm going to change my handles from the aligned handle, which is the default, to automatic. It's actually the same as the graph editor. All the same handle types that you can use in the graph editor, you can use in 3D. It's pretty handy. So with all of them selected, I'm just going to hit V for vector handle. I'm going to change it to be automatic. See how that has smoothed it out? And I can reposition these, and the handles will do their best to kind of make it a nice smooth path. And that's, yeah, that's what I want. That's pretty good. I'm going to leave it at that resolution later, but when we add our bumps, we're going to have to add more control points so that the path sticks to the geometry properly and doesn't intersect through it. You'll see in a moment. Okay, so let's name stuff. So I'm going to select our ground. Let's call it ground. And while we're here, I like to keep these in sync. So I'm just going to copy the name to the data path name to keep them the same. And my path here, the track, I'm going to call that my path. Now, it doesn't matter what you call it, but we're going to do something with Python later on. So you need to make sure that the name that you choose is going to match when we do our Python script later. So yeah, just bear that in mind. And now everything is named. Awesome. I'm going to add some bumps. So I'm going to do that in edit mode on our ground object. And I'm going to turn on our proportional editing so that I can just grab one vert here and pull it up, make a little bump. Just going to give the ground some variation. Make this one little over here. And I'm doing this after I've created my track so I can see where to make the bumps. Do you know what I mean? Because otherwise I could be making it and it's not affecting anything. And let's make that bit go down. So there we go. That's enough. So now we've got our bumpy track, but our path is not sticking to it. So let's make that happen. Oh, actually, before I do that, the shading. See how you can see all the squares on this? I'm gonna shade this smooth. Under the object menu, you can see shade smooth, or there's a shortcut which is W for me. I'll right click and I can choose shade smooth there. That's just visually more pleasing. Look at those curves. Now let's make this path stick to the geometry. So I'm going to go over to the modifiers tab. I'm going to add a shrink wrap modifier, and then I need to choose the object. So I'm going to choose the eyedropper here and then grab our ground. You'll notice that it has stuck to the ground. That is excellent. Now I also want to project our curve above the ground 1 radius of the wheel. So how do we get the radius? We grab our object here, our wheel object, and we can look in the X and the Z dimensions, and this is our diameter. So I'm going to just click in any one of those, the one that says 0.45, not the X direction. I'm going to copy that and then exit out with escape, and then I'm going to put that into the offset. But before I confirm it, I'm going to divide it by 2 to make it the radius. So that is the half there. Now you'll see it's gone a little bit wonky. That's okay, we're going to fix it by changing the nearest surface point. Actually, no, I do want the nearest surface point, but rather the snap mode to be on the surface, we're going to change it to be above the surface. Aha, isn't that nice? So much better. We also need to enable this little button here, but I'll leave that off for now to show you what it does, okay? So I'm going to attach my wheel to the curve object now. Now there's many different ways of doing this. You can just select one and then shift select select the child, which will be the wheel, and then shift select the path and then hit Control P to bring up this menu here. But I've found that it's not the best way of doing it because you run into a few issues with tilt. So I'm going to do it the manual way. That way you have a better understanding of what those options do. Plus you run into less problems basically. So I'm going to choose just the wheel, and I want to add a path constraint to it, a follow path constraint. So I'm going to do that here in the objects constraints, and then choose add object constraint and choose follow path. Now that option in the menu before would have done this for us, but it just sets it up slightly differently that could cause headaches. So we need a target. Let's eyedrop our little path here called my path. Boom, and you'll notice that it has stuck to the path. That is good. Now when we play our animation, you would think it would be going around, but it's not. And that is because there's no animation data on our path. So just to show you what I mean, I'm going to click here and you can see path animation. When I play this, there's actually the evaluation time isn't changing, which means on every frame, it's going to be stuck in the same location, which is why our wheel is not moving. Now we could actually add animation to our path here, but that's the long way of doing it. Let's do it the short way by clicking on our object that has the constraint. And there's a button on the constraint that says animate path. And this will just add some procedural animation so that it flows on every frame. So there we go. It is now going around. We still have some problems with this. Obviously the wheel is not following and it's going way too fast. So let's jump back to the data on our curve. So we jump here, and the path animation, you can see that actually if I stop it, and you see now how the evaluation time is actually changing. It's going up 1 increment of every frame. So that's actually what hitting that button did. So we're going to slow this animation down. It's going way too fast. So by default, it's going to take any path that you create is going to be 100 frames long. But for us, this is way too long. So let's change it to be, say, 400. And you'll notice that that is moving at a much better rate. Also, we can choose, this follow option here isn't going to affect our wheel. It's only going to affect the children objects of the path. So if we had parented our wheel, which we didn't, we used the constraint. So this option would make it follow. But we're ready to go back to our wheel, and we go back to the constraint. And this option here, the follow curve on this option, is going to make it point in the right direction. Excellent. So that has fixed a couple of problems, but you'll notice that our wheel is not actually sticking on the geometry. It's going through the ground on the flat plane. And that is because of our shrink wrap modifier. So we go over to the modifiers on our path. You'll notice that this isn't enabled. If we enable this now, you'll notice that those points are now actually physically projected above the plane. So it essentially makes it work on the deformed geometry, or the deformed points. And that's looking a lot better, but we still got some clipping and whatnot on these curves here. And that's just because we don't have enough control points on our path. So let's jump back into edit mode. And I'm going to just subdivide this. I'm going to hit W or right click if you are the default user, like most of you probably are. I'm going to choose subdivide. And you see it's added more points and it's going to stick to the ground a little bit better, but we might need just one more subdivision. So let's just open up our redo panel and choose 2. And that's looking much better. Awesome. Okay, so I want to talk about the tilt of our object now. So the reason I didn't parent it is because when you do it through parenting, the tilt can go a little bit haywire. See, at the moment, you can see when it goes on a, let me bring it up here. When it goes around a corner or on the side of a hill, it gets a little bit of a tilt to it. Now we can actually manually adjust that by going up here to the overlays and then turning on the normals for our curve. And you can see with these little arrows. So these arrows are pointing in the direction that the path is going to be traveling, and the kind of the parallel arrowness of it, that's not even a word, I know, but that is going to affect our tilt. And I'll just show you what I mean. I'll grab this one here and I'll hit Control T, and you can see I can actually control the tilt. So when we do the parenting way, rather than manually adding that constraint, the tilt can actually be affected by all these things, and it can be tipped over a little bit too far. When we've added it manually, it's actually pretty straight. It's not too far leant over. So yeah, I guess this is a long way of saying just check the tilt and make sure that the tilt isn't wrong. But I've checked this and it's looking all right. It's not penetrating through the ground. I'm checking all over. Oh, actually it did go a little bit over there. So let me check that. So over here, is that going a little bit too far into the ground? Yes, it is. So I'll tell you what I'll do is I'm just going to grab these bits and just subdivide that. Subdivide. So it's got a few more points in that area. Perfect. There we go. So that's how we get around any penetration issues. Now it's time to actually make our wheel rotate along this path.